Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. This is one of those videos that could easily become a monster and I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the introduction brief. What you're about to see is my list of top 50 albums of all time. That does not mean that these are the best albums of all time. It's just a very personal, very honest list of the albums that made an impact on me. And speaking of albums that made an impact on me, I did a video about a few months ago, 10 or 11 months ago, about the top 10 albums that made an impact on me. And some of them you're going to see here too. So when you see an asterisk here in the screen, that means that I have talked about that album in that previous video. So if you want to know more about the album, I welcome you to check out that video. And just like that time, no greatest hits, no live albums, one album per artist. So those are the parameters here. So let me show you what I have. I'm going to start, this is completely random order right here. So we're going to start with this great debut album by The Doors. This was very influential for me, and I still think it's the album by them that I like to listen to the most, even though the other albums are very good too. Then I have an album that I listened to a lot when I was a teenager, which is Metallica's Ride the Lightning. And by the way, when I'm showing you something by a certain band, that sort of means that that is the album that I enjoy the most and the one that I like to listen to. So then I have also from that time, from those days, AC/DC's Ball Breaker. And that may be a weird choice, okay? Most people would go with Back in Black or any of those. But this is the one that made an impact on me and I loved it. I remember when it came out, so I have that kind of relationship with it. Then I have Secret Treaties by Blue Oyster Cult, BOC. This is also a favorite of mine and an album that I find very easy to listen to. Then this is something from relatively recently. I got started with Simon and Garfunkel at a very late age, I would say, and this was the first one that I bought at a time when I was not really listening to a lot of new bands. And I was like, wow, all the years that I wasted not listening to Simon and Garfunkel, and in a matter of months I got all their albums and I absolutely love all of them, but that one remains my favorite. Then this is from a while back, Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms. There are many great songs in the other Dire Straits albums, but I think this one is their masterpiece in terms of the music and in terms of just the I would say the development of the band. The next one that I'm going to show you is another album that I should have listened to when I was much younger, but for some reason the band escaped me and it took me a while to actually start listening to them. And I'm talking about the Smiths with Meat is Murder. I went to a used bookstore that also sells records and I found all of the records by the Smiths, basically. So I bought all of them because I was like, this is an important band, I need to listen to them, and let me tell you, I was not disappointed. Then this is an album, believe it or not, that I should have bought, but my father bought it instead. It was one of those weird situations. I listened to bands from my father's time, and then in this case he was listening to a band that I should be a fan of. And I am a fan, I like them of course, but this is the only album by them that I am really familiar with, and I love it. By the way, I forgot to say what this is, just in case it needs to be said. Coldplay, X and Y. Okay, so I really enjoy listening to that one too. Then I have something from a while back, and this may be a weird choice for this band, but I'm gonna go with Alice in Chains by Alice in Chains. This one, as I said, most people might go with their second album, Dirt, or with one of the EPs or something like that, but I really like this one. And by the way, in Argentina, and I think in Europe and in other places, the colors were the other way around. So the cover was kind of this green type of yellow, and this side right here was this color. I like that better, but this was the one that I found, and I just got it. And then I have, of course, something that you have seen before, which is Get a Grip by Aerosmith. This is really good stuff. I still listen to it, and I just enjoy it very much. Another thing that I have shown you before, so you can visit that other video if you want more details on that, is Iron Maiden's Killers, which is their second album and still the one that basically captured my heart because it was the first one that I bought by them. And I don't know, it was just a very, very important album for me and the one that got me into Iron Maiden. What's your favorite Rolling Stones album? If you like the Rolling Stones, I'm assuming here. Okay, mine is Sticky Fingers. I absolutely love this one. This is right in the middle. I'm a Mick Taylor guy, so yeah, it's like, I mean, I love many of the albums by the Rolling Stones, but this is the one as far as I'm concerned. What about the Beatles? Okay, my favorite is Abbey Road. And I know that in the previous video that I did on 10 influential albums for me, I showed you Help, because that was the one that got me started with the Beatles. But I think this one is, musically speaking, their masterpiece. I could also go with the White Album. Okay, the White Album is also, you know, tremendously important, and I absolutely love it, but I'm gonna go with that. I have a weird choice for the Red Hot Chili Peppers also. Let's see if you can guess which one I'm talking about. It's a very, their weirdest album in a way. I am talking about One Hot Minute, okay? I bought this when it came out. I really like the song Aeroplane. And I just, you know, just got the CD based on that song, the way we used to do back when we did not have the option of downloading one song. You just bought the entire album for that song. And I really like it. I will say this, at first it was difficult for me to get into it because it was not the kind of music that I would listen to in those days. But after a while, it was kind of an acquired taste for me, but I definitely liked it. Then I have something by Whitesnake, okay? I am a big fan of those hard rock, heavy metal, glam rock bands from the 80s, and Whitesnake to me is a really good band. And of course I have many choices, and most people might go with the White Album from the 80s, you know, the classic one. But my absolute favorite is the one with the controversial cover, Love Hunter. Okay, I just love this album. It's kind of in the middle, and it has great songs and just a great style. So that's the one that I chose for Whitesnake as a representation of that. Then it was very difficult for me to get into the alternative music from the US, but there's one album that I would say really, you know, influenced me and that I listened to a lot at a very important time in my life. I don't know how many people listen to this band anymore, but to me, this one, Now You See Inside by SR71, was a very good album, an album that was alternative, but at the same time was different from the kind of thing that was playing in those days, like, you know, Blink-182, Green Day, and all of those. I'm not saying that they're not good or anything, but I really liked this one. I think it's an underrated album, and that's why I decided to include it here. Then I told you before in a previous video that the first artist that I was a big fan of was Michael Jackson, and that my favorite album by him is actually Dangerous. But here I have another important album by him that recently turned 40 years old, which is Thriller. Okay, this was a very important album, of course, and I still would rather listen to Dangerous because I think it has like more of a scope when it comes to the music that is included in it. But I think in this list I wanted to include this one just to kind of do a different thing from the one that I had done before, or maybe I just grabbed it by mistake, but you know, things like that happen. But anyway, there's that other video. I'm a big fan of Kiss, and the album that I'm going to show you is not Dress to Kill, okay? It is Rock and Roll Over. That to me is their best album. And once again, this is completely like hedonistic in the sense of I'm showing you albums that I just have, that to me they're just a pleasure to listen to. That's all there is to it. There's not a lot of thought that goes into this. It's more like of an emotion or a set of feelings that I have. Then there's a band that is kind of, well, actually it is related to Deep Purple, but that not many people listen to, and that is Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Okay, especially from their stuff from the mid 80s and stuff like that. But I chose their first album as a representative here, which is titled, of course, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. I highly recommend this one. It is very good, and it's just a pleasure to listen to. You know, Ritchie Blackmore's guitar style, I just absolutely love it. And then I have something, of course, that I have shown you before, which is Nevermind by Nirvana, an album that does not really need any comment. So here it is. You know, you can hear a little bit more about it in my previous video. So that's it for that. We still have quite a few albums to go, so hopefully this will not be very long. Many people like to make fun of the 80s, especially the hard rock stuff, the glam rock and all of those. I don't. Okay, I absolutely love that stuff, and a big part of that is White Lion, which I am showing you here with Pride, their first album, which I don't know, it's just something that I enjoy listening to. And when it comes to those bands, the hair metal and all of those, it's primarily the guitar. Okay, that is what I enjoy, because I tried to learn how to play the guitar. I didn't get very far, but I tried, and that's what counts. Then I have something also that I have shown you before. Use Your Illusion, of course, by Guns N' Roses. So great favorite albums of mine. I cannot separate them. They go together, they're twin albums. So that's why I'm including both of them here. So I guess in a sense I'm cheating. You're looking at 51 albums instead of 50. I have, of course, The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. My favorite is actually, in terms of the music, Wish You Were Here. But I realized that Dark Side of the Moon is kind of more important. So that's why I went with that one. Another band from the 90s that I really enjoyed, and in particular this album, was Collective Soul. And the album is titled Collective Soul. So that is very convenient for me. What's your favorite Led Zeppelin album, if you have one? Okay, I know, it's very difficult not to choose another one. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the obvious here, and I do have this other version, so you cannot really see the cover very well, but let's see if I can show you. I'm gonna go with Led Zeppelin 4. Okay, and my camera is not cooperating when it comes to the focusing, but you know what it looks like, right? And by the way, Led Zeppelin 3, which comes here, is also a very good one, the more acoustic album. So I enjoy both of those, but number 4 is my choice for this list. Then this is also something that I began to listen to much later on in life. This great album by Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow. It has White Rabbit, okay, it has Somebody to Love, it has Today, and all of those great songs. So I think this is a great album from that time. Then I have also something here that I got into as a young adult, and primarily thanks to my brother, who was the one who decided to buy the entire box set of Kraftwerk. Sorry, that's how we pronounce it here. I know that is not the correct pronunciation, but the one that I decided to include here is Trans-Europe Express. Okay, I could go with basically any of their albums. I really liked Autobahn, Man Machine, and all of those, but I decided to include that one. We're gonna go back to those great 80s bands. Okay, I have Great White. Okay, and they have Once Bitten and Twice Shy. It's a very difficult choice between those two, and I'm not gonna do what I did with the Guns N' Roses album, including both of them. I'm gonna go with the first one, which is Once Bitten. It doesn't have Once Bitten, Twice Shy. That's in the other album, but this one is fantastic also, if you ask me. Then my favorite band is, of course, yes, my friend, the Ramones. Okay, and I showed you this before. I showed you Pleasant Dreams, and I was like, yeah, I chose Pleasant Dreams. It's really weird because it's the least Ramones-like album in their entire discography, but I still hold with that. This was the one that marked me, and that's why I include it here. Then I also showed you before this wonderful, wonderful record, Roxette's Joyride. Okay, a tremendously influential album for me. Okay, so I still include that one here. Believe it or not, I am a big fan of Bryan Adams. Okay, I don't even know why I say believe it or not, because he is a fantastic musician, and I think he is just great, and his songs are easy to listen to, they stay with you, and all of that. But maybe my choice here is not what would be expected, because I chose 18 Till I Die. Okay, this album from 1997, I believe, 96, okay, 96. So this is the one that has The Only Thing That Looks Good on Me Is You, Star, I Think About You, great songs right here. Just I'll Always Be Right There. So I encourage you to check this one out if you haven't listened to Bryan Adams, because he is just a great musician. And then, just as I was a fan of Metallica, I also, of course, had to be a fan of Megadeth. And there was one album. Okay, so you have the early part of Megadeth, which is kind of like more power metal type of music. And then there was a time right there in the middle where it became a little bit more commercial. But I really like that phase in their development. And the album that, to me, I would take with me to a desert island, if you will, is Euthanasia. I think musically this is amazing, and I love listening to it, and that is, as usual with all of these albums, the main reason why I'm including them here. I really like Deep Purple. I would not call myself a huge fan of them. I do not know their music the way I should, but I really enjoyed Fireball. So this is one that I would include. It has, of course, Fireball, Demon's Eye, The Mule, just a lot of great songs here. The original, by the way, did not have a lot of songs, did not include a lot of tracks, but this is an edition that has some extra ones. So that is one of the reasons also that, you know, that album, it makes it a lot better. Then there's a band that many people like to make fun of, particularly because of Metallica, and you already know who I'm talking about. I love this band, okay? I absolutely love Winger, and I'm gonna include here their first album, which is titled Winger, but actually it is titled Sahara. If you look here, it says Sahara here at the bottom corner, but for some reason there was a mistake, and they call it Winger. If you look at the spine, you know, it says just Winger. So this is great, fun music, okay? So that's just you know, something that I like to listen to. I talked to you before about Oasis, and I am still, you know, holding with Be Here Now instead of Morning Glory, because that album was the one that really, you know, got me started when it comes to Oasis. Then back in the day, you know, back in the 90s, if you were listening to alternative type of punk influenced bands, especially outside of the US, you know, because many bands that were listened to here in the US, they didn't get to Argentina. But in Argentina, it was kind of a rivalry, if you will, between Green Day and Offspring, believe it or not, okay? And I know that Offspring was very popular with their with the release of the album Americana, you know, but there's one album before that that I really, really liked, and that is Ignition. Nobody talks about this one. It doesn't have any songs that were important or that were played in the radio or anything like that. Like before Americana, people would think of the album Smash, which had a hit like Self-Esteem, right? Here in this one, when I looked at it, I was like, I don't know any of these songs. Let's try it. And I was amazed. I was blown away. So I'm a big fan of Offspring. Especially their early stuff, and maybe up to Americana. I am also a big fan of Pearl Jam. And here I'm not going to choose 10, I am not going to choose No Code or Vitalogy or any of those, but the one that I'm amazed by is this one right here, which is Yield. I especially like the song Do the Evolution and their video for that one, which is a comic book type of video. I think it's absolutely mind-blowing. So check out the video, listen to the song, and I highly recommend that too. More 80s stuff. Journey, to me their best album is Infinity, and that's the one that I am showing you right here. It has Lights, it has Anytime, Patiently, Wheel in the Sky, okay, but also a song like Something to Hide. That one is really good, so I recommend that too. Depeche Mode was also a band that marked me. I started with a greatest hits, or actually not a greatest hits, but their collection of singles, which was in 2 volumes. And it was very difficult for me to choose one album by them to represent them. But this is the one that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you Violator. Okay, I could go very easily with many other albums by them, but that one is, I think, a very good one to choose. Then back when I lived in Argentina, the band Bon Jovi was primarily a band that, let's say that most of their fans were girls, okay, for some reason. But, you know, I'm glad that that is not the case, or I don't think it's the case here, you know, and I never had trouble saying or, you know, admitting that I was a fan of Bon Jovi, because I think that's a fantastic band too. And you have heard me say the word fantastic many times here, but, you know, I just think these albums are fantastic. So if I had to choose something by Bon Jovi, the one that I would say is their best one is New Jersey. I'm not the only one to think that way. I have heard many people also say that they prefer this album to some of the others. For example, Slippery When Wet. That's a great album, you know. But by the time that I heard it, I had already heard all the hits. And to me, it felt like the other songs, the ones that were included that were not hits, I don't know, there was just something missing there. New Jersey, on the other hand, I felt was great from beginning to end. So that's one of the reasons why I chose that. And then I also had a hard time choosing something by Judas Priest. But I was like, okay, they went through many phases, right? So let's choose something that is right in the middle and that kind of covers a little bit of all of the stuff that they did. The more hard rock / punk rock type of thing, and the more commercial 80s kind of thing, and that would be Defenders of the Faith. I really like all of the songs right here, so you know, this is one album that you want to listen to. And if you want to get something by Judas Priest, make sure that you get the remasters, because they come with some extra tracks that are really good too. So I loved those. I'm a fan of The Clash also. I don't know their albums the way I should. Once again, you know, it's another band that I need to explore more in detail, so I chose London Calling, even though I really like their first album very much too. So this is London Calling. Great scope right there, and not as out of control as the album Sandinista, for example, which to me, it's a little bit too much. My brother is a very big fan of Boston, and he introduced me to them. There's a good choice right there between their first album and their second one, titled Don't Look Back, but I decided to stay with the first one. This is one of those albums that if you were listening to the radio at a given point in time, you had basically listened to the entire album, because just like Led Zeppelin 4, you know, I have heard each one of those songs on the radio at one point. So great stuff right there. And I talked about punk rock, so I could not avoid including something by the Sex Pistols. And I had a really hard time here, you know, choosing which one of their albums am I going to include here. Of course, I'm just kidding. Their only album, Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. Great punk rock. I'm more of a Ramones fan, okay? I will say that. If I had to choose Sex Pistols, The Clash, or the Ramones, I would say, without a doubt, the Ramones. That's the kind of person that I am. But all of them are great, if you ask me. Another band that my brother introduced me to is Genesis, okay? And one of the albums that I really enjoyed listening to was this one right here, A Trick of the Tail. If you want an introduction to Genesis or to this album, I would say listen to the song Ripples. Ripples with, you know, 3 dots after that. Great song, great album, this one. So I think it's a very good kind of a portal into the music of Genesis. Then what do we have here? Here we have Santana, okay? The third one. All of them, the first 3 albums are amazing, all of them. But let me go with the third one. I had a difficult time making that choice right there. So that's the one that I want to include. Also, another band that I started to listen when I was a young man, that I should have listened to before, the Pixies, okay? And I know that Kurt Cobain included in his list Surfer Rosa, and I think that one is perhaps a more interesting album, because the one that I'm going to show you, which is Doolittle, is a little bit more pop, okay? So I do realize that, but I still think this is a great album here. And I read a book about it in the 33 and a Third series that kind of talked about all of the songs and the production of the album. So I recommend, you know, reading about the Pixies too, because I really enjoyed that book on that series. And of course, you know, we have only a few albums to go. Let's see, we have 3 more only, and I have not mentioned Queen, and that is a crime. This is completely random order, okay? Because if we were going by order of importance or order of influence in my life, I would have to mention Queen basically in the first 10 albums that I talked about. And this is also going to be a weird choice, and I'm just going to let the album speak for itself. My favorite album by Queen it's not Hot Space, okay, but it is The Game. That's all I'm going to say. I love this one. I love the song Need Your Loving Tonight. Okay, this, I don't know, it's just one of those things, you know, one of those things. You listen to this, you like it, it changes your life, and that's pretty much it. I went also through a phase, okay, I'm going to call it a phase, but that doesn't mean that I do not enjoy the band or that I do not like them anymore or anything like that. But at one point in my life, when I started going to college, I was obsessed with 9 Inch Nails. And no, it's not going to be the Downward Spiral. It's not going to be the Fragile, which are the albums that I believe are more musically rich and maybe more original. But I still really like listening to Pretty Hate Machine. So that's why I'm showing you this album here. And then the last album I'm going to show you, this is going to be weird because I don't actually have this album. I am talking about Cosmos Factory by Creedence Clearwater Revival. Good old CCR, right? But the thing is, this this compilation right here, right, includes the that album, Cosmos Factory, in its entirety. This is a collection from the Netherlands. So if you can get it, it's titled, let's see, It says Creedence Clearwater Revival Collected, okay, and it's a 3 CD, 50 track collection. And Cosmos Factory is, I think, my favorite because let me share with you what tracks are included in this album. Before You Accuse Me, Traveling Band, Long as I Can See the Light, Looking Out My Back Door, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Who Stopped the Rain, Up Around the Bend, Run Through the Jungle. I think those tracks really speak for themselves. All of their albums are very good, but Cosmos Factory, I think, is my favorite. So my friends, we are at minute 20 something, okay, so this turned out a little bit longer than I had planned, but I hope you enjoyed the list. You had probably seen Kurt Cobain's list of his top 50 albums online. I am not Kurt Cobain, but you know, I'm just a guy here who wants to share his musical tastes with you. Once again, that is my top 50 albums of all time, a very personal list and a very honest list. I am by no means implying that these are the best albums of all time. It's just 50 albums that I really enjoyed listening to. Have you heard any of these? Do you have any favorites from here? What albums would you include in the top 50 list? I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, recommendations, recipes, and anything else you would like to share with me. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.